Hi everyone, welcome in. It's great to be here with you. I'd love it because I can't see you. I'd love it if you would say hi in the chat and just let me know that you can hear me all right in the microphone because I'm testing some new equipment. So if you can, just say a quick hi in the chat. Just going to give a couple of minutes for others to join, see if anybody else is coming in. Hello. Okay. Hi, Joe. Hi. It's strange. I've never hosted a video on YouTube before. It's quite nice using Zoom because you can see people's faces and interact. So this is a little bit new and different for me, but it means we've got a recording there that's accessible if you want to view. Anybody else want to say hi in the chat? Hi, David. Welcome in. Fab. So how are we doing? 2 minutes past 7. Okay. So I've got a few bits and bobs of notes here with me, and I've got some things on the screen. So I'm going to be referring to a few different things. So if I look like I'm sort of fiddling around in the kitchen here or doing imaginary things, that's why. Also got the microphone here, so I hope you can hear me all right there. And I've got the drum with me, so we're going to be doing a little drum journey later on in the workshop, so we can experiment with some journeying, which is great. So I guess I'll dive in. So welcome everyone to the power of shamanic journeying. It would be great to know actually who of you have practiced any shamanic journeys before and who knows nothing about it, who knows a little bit, who knows what. So if you'd like to share anything in the chat, that would be great. It's kind of nice to know where everyone's at. But just a little bit of background on me. So I'm a wellness practitioner, healing practitioner, former lecturer, and I've been practicing shamanic journeying for around about 6 years now. And I'm a qualified shamanic practitioner. I did my training course with the Healing Tree Centre, a practitioner called Derek Gain in Cornwall. So I've had a really interesting and weaving journey on the shamanic path. And it's been very transformational for me. And it's something that we can access really, really easily. New to it, Fab, just a little bit with you and others. Yeah, because you've been to some of the circles at the Winter Gardens where I've done a little bit of shamanic journey and guided journeys, which is another way to access the journey realm in a really valid way. So it's great that it's new to you, Anushka. And so what was I saying? Yeah, so I've been journeying for about 6 years and beginning to weave journeying into my moon circles and my group events and things like that. And I've taught a course on beginners journeying. I'm into the 3rd year now. And yeah, so what I was saying is it's something that is really, really easy for anyone to access. I believe it's easy for anyone to access. Sometimes when people start out on the journey, that doesn't really work, on the path of shamanic journeying, they might not find that they're visual immediately. And sometimes it takes a few goes to begin to trust in other senses. But I'll talk about that a little bit more later on when we touch upon the 4 clairs of psychic sensitivity. So yeah, it's something that is really blossoming in the West, and it's becoming more prevalent in the spiritual community. And it has been It's been present in the West since the 1960s, since the kind of psychedelic era. There's no surprise there. There is kind of a link because in the shamanic journey, we go into an altered state of consciousness. So that really kind of like married up with the free thinking and expanded consciousness of the 60s. So yeah, since the 90s, it's been gaining followers, and it's been gaining numbers, and yeah, so it's pretty common now. But there's a lot of misconceptions about what shamanism is, what the shamanic path is. So hopefully we can go through some of those things today and clarify some of that up for you. And also, I'd just like to say, if anyone has any questions that they'd like to throw in throughout, if there's anything that you just think, well, what's that? Or I'd like to know more. I'm really happy to address the questions as we go or at the end. But if there's something that occurs to you, just drop it in the text. I've got the text here. The chat, so we can do that. Okay, so I feel like I want to just get straight into I'm going to use the framework of the questions that I put in the email and the social media post as kind of like a guideline to guide me in to this. So the first point, or the first question, is what is shamanic journey and how similar is it to meditation? I suppose I should kind of like start by talking about what shamanism is, or what the word shaman means. And you'll notice I say shaman, not shaman. It's just a kind of slight specificity in the pronunciation there. So a shaman, the word actually comes from the Tungus tribe in Siberia. And there's two translations for the word shaman. One of them is one who sees in the dark, because the shamanic journey is usually done behind, with closed eyes, usually, traditionally at least. So one who sees in the dark and one who knows is another translation. So it's kind of like a wise one, or a shaman could be a spiritual leader. And there's a distinction that I'd like to make between a shaman and a shamanic practitioner. So shamans traditionally are indigenous tribal peoples who've been selected within their tribe for their particular abilities, and they will have gone through quite a lengthy initiation process, and they'll have worked with the leaders, the healers of their tribe, to develop their gifts and their talents and their powers. And this initiation can go on for 10 years or more. And the path of shamanism really is a lifelong learning process. There's a lot to it, and it's something that once you immerse into and initiate, it really becomes part of you and part of your life path and your life story. So on the other hand, a shamanic practitioner is someone who uses the practices of shamanism. Perhaps they use them in the West, or a shamanic practitioner could be anywhere, but they're not necessarily those tribal peoples, those indigenous peoples who've gone through lengthy, rigorous. Of course, a shamanic practitioner could have went through very many years of training and practice with different tribes throughout the world, different traditions. But there's generally a distinction made. Some shamanic practitioners are very happy to use the word shaman and call them that. They don't observe the differences, but there's a little bit of a distinction there. So perhaps a shamanic practitioner might be a Westerner, perhaps they might not be. But traditionally a shaman comes from native traditional cultures. So the practices of shamanism, it's very rooted in nature, and it's working in harmony with nature, the forces of nature. And the practice exists in order to create balance, living in harmony. And sacred reciprocity is a term that's used quite a lot. And that basically means you give for what you take, and everything is kept in balance. So that's a really important function of shamanism. So the process of shamanic journey, and this is really what sets shamanism apart from other spiritual practices, such as medicine, men and women, or animists. I'll touch upon that again a little bit later. So the practice of the shamanic journey, the purposes of the shamanic journey is to connect with spiritual guides in non-physical realms in order to ask for help, healing, balance, in order to ask for help and assistance on the physical realm. So in the shamanic journey, the shaman, shamanic practitioner, the individual seeking to connect with spirit guides will sync or allow themselves to change their everyday state of waking awareness. And they do this through achieving a trance state, or we could also call that a meditative state, where consciousness isn't fully locked into everyday normal waking awareness, but it's not the unconscious state of sleep either. It's somewhere in the middle where we can tap into the pineal gland and the inner eye and the inner realm of consciousness. So there's different words and names given to this space that we would meet spiritual guides. One of them is the other world. Western anthropologists, such as Michael Harner. Michael Harner was one of the first researchers and practitioners. This is going to be the opposite way around for you. Oh no, that's how it's flipped it. So this is one of the first books on shamanism, and I really recommend this book. And he was doing a lot of anthropological studies in the 1960s and working with different cultures around the world, doing research. And he coined the term, or he brought the term to the West, non-ordinary reality. So the reality that you and I are talking together in now would be ordinary reality on the 3D realm in the physical world of matter. But when we meet and connect with non-physical allies, spiritual allies, we do this in what's called non-ordinary reality, non-physical reality. And different traditions call it different things. Like Aboriginal traditions call it the dream time. The Celts would call it the other world. I wonder if any of you guys know any other words for it that I haven't come up with. So non-ordinary reality. So it's the act of seeking out beings, spiritual guides, spiritual assistants, and going to meet them. So disconnecting from our normal state of awareness to reach the home of these helping spirits. So in order to do that, as I said, there needs to be some sort of breakaway from a normal state of waking awareness. And it's usually the drum. It's usually achieved by the drum. So frame drums such as this. I'm not going to drum just yet because it distorts the microphone a little bit. And there's a specific drum beat that's used by shamans, and it's somewhere between 4 and 7 beats per second. And what this slow rhythmic beat does is that it slows the brain waves down, which brings you into a more relaxed state of consciousness. And it takes you from a beta. Sorry, I'm just going to ruffle some papers, excuse me. So a normal state of waking awareness in our everyday lives will be 13 to 39 cycles per second. And this is called the beta frequency. So this is when we're going to work, we're going about our everyday life. Perhaps we're going to the supermarket, perhaps we're driving. Below that is the alpha state of consciousness, which is 8 to 13 cycles per second. And this is where your subconscious is, where you're very deeply relaxed, light hypnosis, meditation, daydreaming. So one down from that is called theta, and that's 4 to 8 cycles per second. And this is light sleep, and this is said to be where shamanic journeying happens. So obviously when you journey, you're not in light sleep. Hopefully you don't fall asleep. Doesn't really matter if you do, but it's harder to remember. But this is where you're very, very susceptible to impressions. Your brain isn't worrying too much about practical matters. You're not worrying too much about logic. You're in that suggestible state. And when we go to the other world and when we're journeying to communicate with guides, what we're doing is we're going into a state where, or a place where we're expecting a two-way exchange of information. So we're kind of going to have a conversation. We're going to gain knowledge. We're going to gain help. We're going to perhaps ask for advice. And so we are going in a receptive state. So the drumbeat helps to entrain the brain to this slower brainwave state and helps us get into that more relaxed state of awareness. As I said, somewhere between alpha and theta is that good place. And that's also a state of healing and where the body regenerates and repairs itself. So in that way, it's similar to meditation, because in meditation, we're seeking to rest the body, we're seeking to replenish, and we're seeking to get to those nice, slow brainwave states. So this slowed brainwave state, it's where the pineal gland, which is where dreaming comes from, which exists kind of the middle of the forehead at the back over here, obviously where dreams come from, where we get our inner vision, our inner sight. This is kind of almost awakened when we're in the nice slowed theta and alpha brainwave states. So another distinction between meditation and journeying is that we're going specifically to interact, to have conversations, to get information. Okay. So, as I said, if you've got any questions as we go, flip them in the chat. So shamanism is quite interesting. So, as I said, what we know about, or what is generally known as shamanism now in the West, the term comes from a specific tribe in Siberia called the Tungus tribe, one who sees in the dark. But it's a loosely affiliated group of practices that have sprung up independently all over the world, in Asia, the Americas, Australia, pretty much worldwide. The common thread is partnership with nature, partnership with the forces of nature, living in balance. Obviously, these practices are extremely old. They predate any religion. There was some, I can't remember exactly when it was, but there was some remains of a female shaman found definitely in the last 10 years. And it was carbon dated back 100,000 years. But we know that shamanism is at least that old, if not older. So it's very, very ancient practices, predating modern civilization. So in some ways, primitive peoples perhaps, but certainly spiritually advanced, and certainly having a lot of traditional tools and techniques to connect with unseen forces, with spirit guides, and also with the forces of nature. Not having the technologies that we do now, in some ways made primitive peoples more advanced, because they were more advanced in these technologies and traditions, these spiritual technologies and traditions. So yeah, I'm not going to go into talking about partnership with nature too much, other than what I might say is that what is a common practice throughout different shamanic traditions is worship of the directions. And so I'll talk about the word animism now. So have you guys heard the word animism before? Which basically is a word to describe that everything in nature has a soul, has a sense of being, has a character, has properties, exists as a consciousness. So say, for example, the wind is a consciousness, water has consciousness, earth and fire, and they all have a very unique character and essence of their being that they bring to the planet, and that they bring to life. They bring to the whole of existence, and they can be teachers and allies by their characteristics. And so the practice of shamanism delves into learning about the characteristics of the elements, the 4 directions, north, east, south, west, for which an element will usually be attributed and linked up. For example, in my tradition that I was taught by my teacher, the element of south is linked, the direction of south is linked with the element of fire. So if you think about the direction of south, you have the midday sun in the south. The fullness of the sun represents the fullness of fire. So each of the directions is linked to an element. So how can I use shamanism or shamanic journey, and what do I have to do to access the journey state? So drumming is one way to access the journey state. Rattling is also often used by shamans. Again, a repetitive rhythm that takes you out of your normal everyday state of awareness. Quite often when people journey, they'll lie down. I'm sure if you've journeyed with me before in the winter gardens, you'd be definitely reclining into a comfortable position. I personally like to journey sitting upright. I feel like if I'm lying down, I feel like my brain's a bit too passive or switched off, and I feel like I'm not going to remember as much. I know that a lot of contemporary shamanic teachers have found that younger students don't really need to lie down and don't need to wear eye masks. They can just slip into this alternate state quite easily and achieve those states. Whereas definitely practitioners in the sort of 60s, 70s, 80s, and a little bit beyond that, it'd be like blanket, lie down, eye mask, drumming, and it would take a little while to get into that nice, relaxed state. But it's horses for courses. The shamanic drum is sometimes referred to as the horse on which the shaman journeys to get from one place to another place. I might just talk briefly about the symbolism of the world tree now. So I've got a picture of a tree here. So you've got obviously the trunk existing on the horizon there, the earthly plane. So the earthly plane in the other world, three realms. So middle world, lower world, upper world. Let me talk about that. So you could journey in 3 realms. So we're disconnecting from conscious awareness, going into our semi-trance, going into our imaginations, and it is partly your imagination that you use. And sometimes when people journey, they'll say, I don't know if I'm making it up. I think it might just be all in my head. But of course, in your head is where it all happens, and you are one half of the conversation. So yeah, in some ways you are making it up, but you're also being receptive. And when you start a journey, you start with a very clear intention or a clear intent about, you might have intention about where you're going, but you will definitely have intention about who you're journeying to, why you're journeying, what you're asking for, what your request is, what your inquiry is. So you specify that before you go into the trance state. And obviously, if you're on a guided journey, that would have been specified on your behalf by the likes of myself if I do a guided journey. So there'd be a very clear intention to start off with. Sorry, I just had a drink. Okay, so if I was planning to journey to perhaps meet my power animal, animals typically would exist in the lower world terrain. So there's the lower world through which you would usually access through something like tree roots, a well, a cave, or perhaps something crazy like the sea parting. People quite often, well, not often, but people can get a little bit confused about the lower world and think that it's going to be somewhat like going into the ground and feeling smothered and feeling like they're being sort of buried alive or something, or kind of get confused with the iconography of hell in the Christian construct. But actually the lower world's not really anything like that. It's a bit like breaking through a narrow or like a shallow partition between the worlds. So you might not travel or feel like you're traveling deeper down than, say, maybe 10 to 20 feet beneath the surface of the earth. And what happens when you come out into a light, and you come out into a hyper reality that kind of looks like everyday world, but kind of on Disney steroids, where everything's a bit more pure and pristine and beautiful and alive and rich and colorful. So that's the lower world, where you would meet typically animal spirit guides. Middle world is a mirror of our world. So it's kind of like a parallel reality, and that would typically be where you would communicate with plant spirits, tree spirits, perhaps crystals, elementals such as pixies and the fae. So that would be the middle world space. And the upper world. So the upper world is kind of, that's where you would meet human teachers, ascended masters, angels, perhaps loved ones that have passed on. And that's accessible, as you might think, by going upwards. And so in the journey space, you would set your intention to go to the upper world. You would look for something that would help you get there. So, for example, you might climb up the branches of a tree. You might find that a balloon comes along that you grab onto and the balloon lifts you up. You might have a helpful bird that flies in and helps you get there, or something appears that helps you get to the upper terrain. And what happens is you go up into the sky, you go into space. It sounds crazy. You go into space and you pop through what feels like a membrane, and that is where the upper world space exists. So 3 levels. And what's really, really interesting about this is that these levels or layers of the shamanic space exist throughout all of these different cultures, throughout all of these different cultural experiences. And surprisingly, they can be accessed very, very easily by anyone who comes to this practice, sets the intention, creates the space, and goes about these journeys. It's as if it's written into our DNA. It's hardwired in. And yeah, it's a really, really interesting kind of world that you never knew was there, but somehow is already mapped out. So how can I use shamanic journeying? So I'm going to talk about the benefits and whether it's safe to journey, because I know that people can get a little bit anxious about this sort of spiritual practice. When I went for my first day of kind of pre-training with my teacher in Cornwall, and there was a group of about 20 people there who were kind of having a taste today and dipping their toe in. And there was one girl in particular who was very, very nervous about the practice of journeying. I think she might have had a bad experience in her spiritual path before then, and she was worried that she was going to cross paths with a negative spirit or something that she felt was harmful or an intrusion. But that's like, I kind of actually don't know anyone who's had that experience. But when you journey, the first thing that you do is you meet your power animal or your spirit guides, which is usually you start with your animal friends who are your protectors, as well as your guides, and they act like your buffers. They're wise and benevolent creatures who have not just, so if we think about ourselves in our everyday life, we've got all of our experiences that we carry with us, but we don't individually carry all of the knowledge of humanity in our conscious awareness. However, when we journey to animal spirits in the non-physical realm, we're not just communicating with one animal, we're communicating with, they're almost like a symbol or a totem. They're a representative of the entire species, and they have the collective knowledge of that entire species. So let's say, for example, you journeyed to meet your power animal and found that your power animal was a cat, perhaps a tiger or some such thing. Although that will be one individual, they will carry with them the entire wealth of experience throughout history of all of the tigers that have ever existed. So they're really, really wise creatures, and they have their unique medicine, their unique characteristics that they share. So I want to come back to benefits there and safety. Yeah. So basically your animals act as your protectors and guides, and you would always have your animal protector spirit guide with you as you journeyed in the other world or alternative space. So I want to talk about some of the benefits or the purposes of journeying. So when we incarnate here on Earth, we go through the veil of amnesia, and we basically agree to give up all of the knowledge of previous incarnations, knowledge that we've gained along our evolutionary path, knowledge of the bigger picture of our existence, and we kind of give up knowledge of our skills and strengths. And it's like an experiment. So we're kind of like, it's a bit like we're swinging a stick in the dark, and it's through the pursuit of the spiritual path that we're coming back to the truth of ourselves, what our skills and talents are, why we're here, what our purpose is. And our spiritual guides, who some of which will have been with us since we were born, some of which come in at certain points throughout our path, but they know our unique blueprint, they know our skills and talents, they know our life purpose, they have that overview. So they are really there waiting for us to call on them, waiting for us to reach out, and they're waiting to kind of help and guide us. So it's like having this amazing cheerleading support team that understand you on quite a deep level. And some of your spiritual guides will have been with you since birth, perhaps even in several lifetimes. And so it can be quite uncanny, the kind of the feeling of familiarity, and they won't really hold back when it comes to sometimes calling you out if you're specifically seeking guidance. They kind of help to steer you to your highest path towards your potential. So really, there's such a deep, wise, and valuable guidance system. And the beauty of this path, of course, is that it's called the path of direct revelation, and because you're going directly to spirit, directly to spiritual sources, and you're finding out for yourself. It's really a dialogue between you and spirit, you and your spirit guides, you and your angels, perhaps, if you journey to angels. So you're directly finding out. It's not like going to an astrologer or a tarot card reader or some other such spiritual practitioner and asking them to communicate to spirit on your behalf. You're going there directly. So you're not relying on an intermediary, unless, of course, you're working with a shaman or a shamanic practitioner who's journeying on your behalf. Very aware that I'm talking quite a lot, and I'd quite like to get to the journey point soon. So perhaps I will answer a couple more of these points. So I just want to talk about the 4 clairs. So not everyone is massively developed in the visual sensory, their internal space. So it could also be that you have sensitivity in that you feel things quite strongly. You might be very intuitive with your feelings. You might get gut feelings. You might get a sense of physical knowing or mental clarity about something. You might be intuitive in that way, that sometimes perhaps you get a combination of feeling and knowing something. So whether you're developed in your sensitivities or not, that's something for you to explore in your own way. Also, another one is clairaudient. Quite often when I'm journeying, it'll be something that's kind of just dropped into my head or audio. I remember introducing my mum to this practice and she was like, I didn't really see the rabbit, but I heard the word rabbit. So is that still relevant? Yes. So feeling, thoughts, hearing things, or seeing, they're all valid, they're all relevant, and they're all ways in which guides will communicate with us. So one last thing I want to say is that why these ancient traditional practices are really, really helpful, really, really valid in contemporary society, and why they're growing in popularity. I mean, you guys have probably got your own reasons for being intrigued about this. I feel like it's a real clarion call coming from the spiritual realms, the higher realms right now, to kind of draw people to this path through their intuition and through their wanting to find out more about themselves, their consciousness, and delve into connecting with kind of other realms, the spiritual realms, perhaps even celestial realms. And I think that we've reached a point in evolution where business, technology, banking, politics, control systems have become so advanced. Globalization, kind of how we live. We don't live particularly close to the land anymore. We've lost our connection to the cycles of nature. We're slowly beginning to regain them again, the sort of movement with women's circles and so on. And, we're seeking things out, and the pandemic brought people a bit closer to nature again. But by and large, the control systems have a bit of a grip. And they're chipping away at our connection to Mother Earth and equilibrium in the ecosystems. And so it's really important that we get back in touch with this idea of ourselves as being part of nature, part of the cycles, part of Mother Earth, realizing our not just small place in the grand scheme of things, but our place as divine creatures in the scheme of things, and really growing in our power and growing in our awareness. And there's nothing that I've come across in my spiritual pursuits quite like the shamanic path for developing power, developing awareness, and really working in tandem with spiritual guides to reveal truth and to kind of strip away the illusions that we carry about ourselves, the delusions that we have, the fear that we kind of build up and hide behind. And so it can be a challenging process, but it's very, very rewarding. And yeah, it can really help see clearly through through the advice and through the clarity that we can get back from communicating with guides who have a higher perspective picture of the world, have a higher perspective picture of evolution of the planet and the ascension that we're going through as we move from the third dimension to the fifth and the seventh dimension eventually. And this is what's happening on Earth in this 20-year period that we're in between 2012, the cosmic moment, and the end goal of 2032, where we're shifting towards a more heart-centered, consciously aware, expanded consciousness, and fair society and Earth. So that's all I'm going to say about that. And I've talked for a very long time. I do apologize. So I'd like to take us into the journey space. I'd like to take us into the middle world. And what I think I'd like to do is I'd like to seek out and introduce you guys perhaps to the lower world space. So we're not going to connect specifically with guides today. We're just going to have a look at the terrain. We're just going to have a kind of mooch, poke our head in, and have a look at how the space works. So perhaps you've journeyed with me before. I think if we've journeyed before, we might have done middle world journeying. So we'll have a look at the lower world. So just again about the lower world. So the lower world, it's not buried underground. It's like going through a little portal and kind of coming out into an alternate space, a more vivid space. So it can be reached through openings, which are like portals. So as I said, things like caves, little pools. How else? Sometimes people go down the roots of a tree and they move down and down. And eventually you come out into the light. So you might go through a tunnel, or you might go down some steps, or you might kind of wiggle through a narrow space. Let's have a go. Let's have a go at doing this. So our intent is going to be to journey to the lower world and have a look at our lower world terrain. So we're going to go down, we're going to have a little look around. So I'd like everyone to get themselves comfortable. I'll lead the first part of the journey. So wherever you are right now, perhaps even dim the light a little bit, because we're going to do this with closed eyes, and it helps if we can have a little bit of a dark space. Quite often people do journey with like an eye mask on or a hat over their eyes or something like that. But I'll ask you to get yourself as comfortable as you can. I'm going to start drumming soon. So I'm going to do a little bit of drumming where I'm not going to say anything. I'm not going to lead the journey. And it just allows the microphone to adjust to the beat of the drum, because there will be a little bit of interference first, and then it settles in after a few seconds. So firstly, guys, if you're nice and comfortable, come to the darkness behind closed eyes. That's the first thing. And I'd just like you to begin to settle into your breathing and just noticing the breath. Just watching the in-breath and the out-breath, and noticing the temperature of the breath as it enters the nostrils, and then as it leaves, having been warmed by the body. Just allowing the drum to adjust in the microphone. And just allowing your ears to get things in this place? What does the ground feel like under your feet? What's the temperature of the air on your skin? Looking around, you're alone in this place, you have it to yourself. Listening to the sounds, deeply immersing in your place in nature, being there with all of your senses. Just reminding yourself of the intent for today to journey into the lower world and have a look around at the terrain of your lower world space, just to familiarize yourself, just to make the journey, just to make those pathways internally. And so you begin to look around for an opening, a doorway, a portal to the lower world. Just looking, no need to force, see what comes forward to you, see what presents itself. And moving now into that portal, into that doorway, journeying down into the lower world. Down and down, down with your intention. And coming out now into the light of the lower world, and looking around you, sensing and feeling and taking it all in. What do you see? What do you hear? What are the smells? What sort of space are you in? What's the temperature? What does the sky look like? And just taking a few moments to explore your lower world space. Allowing yourself to journey freely, perhaps touching the world around you, feeling the textures, feeling the air, noticing if you have plants, greenery, whatever you notice, taking it all in. Do you notice any smells? Does anything take your attention? Does anything feel like it wants you to pursue? And as I change the signifies the return, the end of the journey. And as it changes again, we begin to retrace our steps, turning around, following the beat of the drum, back the way we came, like following breadcrumbs, back into the portal, back into the tunnel, upwards and upwards, turning back the way we came, back to the middle world, back to our starting point in nature. Landing back now in your starting place in nature. Coming back to the smells, the sights, the sounds of your starting place. And from there, I'd just like you to come back to your physical body, noticing first your hands, your face, the temperature of the air on your skin, your feet, your whole body, and just having a little bit of movement and coming back into the room, opening your eyes and commanding all parts of yourself to be fully present in the here and now. And the drum has made my hearing very, very sensitive. I quite often forget to put earplugs in when I drum, but it's like, ooh. So I hope you guys could hear the drumming all right there. I know that it doesn't always translate very well through equipment. So I hope that was all right. I know that was quite a short journey, but I really just wanted this to be an introductory exploration of that alternate space, switching from ordinary reality into the slower brainwave state and just reaching that. So can everyone let me know if in the chat if they reached the lower world space? And if you did, can you give me a brief introduction of what the lower world space looked like for you and anything that you remember from, or anything that you noticed in that space? I would love to hear if that landed for you, if you're able to. No one? Okay, it's no problem. So, we've got an answer. Brilliant. I like this engagement. Okay. Yeah, so David says he saw lush green rolling hills with a path. That's interesting, the fact that you saw a path that was as if it was beckoning you on. Did everyone actually manage to enter into that space to report? The portals come like surprisingly quickly and easily. Can you let me know what your portal was to get from the middle world to the lower world? So Anushka, you said you went through a whirlpool and into a river. Yeah, whirlpools are really common. Joe said it was autumnal and went from summer to autumn in the lower world. That's really interesting. And that leads me into touching upon symbolism in journeys. Because we're going into a space that is going to be largely visual in our perception, we come into the world of symbols. Of course, when we communicate with spiritual guides, sometimes there are words exchanged, but we're really going into the world of imagery, of symbols, and we kind of have to use our interpretative faculties. So it's really, really interesting because although in the Northern Hemisphere, in the physical world here now, we're moving from winter into spring. You're moving from summer into autumn, Joe, there. So I think that's something to look into there, whether that's like a small cycle that you're going through where you're moving into, because autumn's all about letting go and shedding leaves and releasing, ready kind of to be born anew the next year. So that's really, really interesting. So Joe, you said that you went into a hole in a tree. Yeah, James, a doorway and a rock face. Ooh, interesting. Your whirlpool was in a cave in the woods. Fab. So it kind of sounds like you guys have all already got a gist of what your terrain looks like. Not all the time, but often when you set about doing a shamanic journey, you might start from exactly that same place in nature. But really, like, you can start from anywhere that you want to. Perhaps you find a new place that you visit, like say you visit like a waterfall, and you think, oh, maybe I'll start my journey in from that waterfall place. What happens is you find different pathways down to the lower world, and you'll come out into a different space. So what I found in my journey is that the different places that I start from, it's as if the journey downwards is the same and the space that I come out to underneath is the same, so that I know that if I want to go and visit a specific guide, I know the way to go to get there, and it won't be the same way that I would go to see something else or someone else. So in trying these different spaces out, of course, we can go different places from our first starting point in nature, but it's almost like this terrain already exists, and we're going and finding it and mapping it out, which is really, really interesting. Yeah, rocks and so on. Has anyone got any questions that they'd like to ask about any of this? So when I first started journeying, I found it really, really easy to get to the lower world, but I found it a little bit more difficult to get to the upper world. Sometimes it was taking me like 3 or 4 goes to get up. That's for another time. Can't fit everything in right now. I think everyone would fall asleep in anyways. Any questions? I saw hedgehogs snuffling about there. Again, hedgehogs are quite rich in their symbolism. So hedgehogs are very, very old. They're almost linked to prehistory. And hedgehogs, they keep their belly to the ground. They're very, very sensitive to the subtle vibrations of the earth, and they can kind of like preempt what's coming. Of course, they're creatures who've got spines, so they can be quite defensive and stick their quills out. So, which brings me to symbolism. There's lots and lots of books on this. There's one book in particular that I'm gonna. Oh, do you know what? It's because I've got the laptop perched on it. There's one book in particular that I want to mention. I'm just gonna have to. I don't want to move the book around too much. What's it called again? I don't want to move the laptop. Let me just. I'll email. I'll email it to everyone because I've very stupidly perched my laptop on it to make the laptop a little bit higher. One last question I've got to ask you guys. So Anushka said you've never done it before. Joe's just done bits and pieces. Has anyone got any sort of gist about what their spirit animal might be, or any animals that they're drawn to, akin to? I kind of wish that we could make this a really, really in-depth exploration. No. Okay, I feel like I want to guess for everyone, but I won't do that. But I would have thought, Joe, that if you saw hedgehogs would be somehow important and relevant to you. But I'd love to find mine. Yeah, of course. And it's a wonderful journey, such a rich and deep journey. So that kind of segues me into briefly talking about what I've got coming up next. So my dog was my spirit animal. Oh, so cute. What kind of dog was it? I love that. Here we go. Okay, so I'm probably going to do another one of these workshops as an introduction, but what I'm planning on doing, Jack Russell, as spirit animals, the Jack Russell, gorgeous. So starting in March, gosh, so soon. So yeah, I keep losing track of time. I don't know about you guys. This year's going quite blurry in time. So coming up, I'm going to be delivering online a 6-week course, which pulls together all of the best practices for starting your shamanic journey starting your shamanic journey in practice. So going into the lower world, middle world, upper world, connecting with your spirit animal, getting to know your guides, getting to know your pathways, safe practices for journeying, practices for preparation, how you pose questions. So it's going to be 6 weeks of online meetings like this. And it's going to be about not only developing relationships with your spiritual guides in the other world, but also developing your own power through these relationships, through the types of questions that you ask, through the knowledge that you gain, building skills in journeying. So different techniques for, let's say, how to protect yourself when you're journeying. Different ways of journeying, such as using the rattle as well as the drum. Another technique that I've covered before is using oracle cards as a way of journeying. I'll also be talking about how your journeys link up with your dreams and how you can kind of cross over reference these. So I've taught this course, this will be the 3rd time now. This is the first time I'm doing it online, and I'm quite excited about it because there's going to be a few different things included in the course. There's going to be a group, there's going to be homework given, it's going to be interactive. So there'll be the lesson it's going to be on Tuesday nights, there'll be the lesson, and then there'll be homework given, and it'll be put in the group, and you can interact with that and obviously do the tasks, and I'll be communicating with people there. There'll be space to share ideas and so on. You guys will share your journeys, and we'll kind of learn from each other. There'll be a reading list with different resources on. And also all of the journeys, all of the sessions will be recorded, so it'll be something that you can refer back to if you want to, or if you can't make a particular date, you can check in and catch up with that. So that's going to be 6 weeks, and it's starting on, let me just double check the date, the 18th of March. So let me know if you're interested in that. I'll send out information via emails. So let me just give you the price rate for that as well, because that's always one of the, obviously, main bits of information. So 6 weeks, £180, special offer if you book before the end of the month, £160. So that includes all of the lessons, the recordings, the Facebook group, the homework, the interactivity, a place where we can share our shamanic journeys, a place where we can share resources, the reading list, and so on. So I hope that that's like piqued your interest in some way. Obviously, this is a deeply personal practice. And it's kind of like, it's rich, and it kind of feels wholesome to dip into this tradition, this ancient tradition that goes back hundreds of thousands of years, and reach into the roots of what our spiritual life is, what our spiritual rights are, and kind of tap into the multidimensionality that we are as beings. We've been reduced to this kind of like physical life where we go from A to B, and we go to work, and we go home, and we go shopping. But we're so much more than that, and we're only just kind of really beginning in contemporary society to wake up to that. And this practice really, really helps you stretch into your roots and connect outwards with great spirit, with wider spirit, and gain more clarity in that. So if you're interested in taking this journey further with me, I'd love to have you on board. And yeah, reach out to me. I'll send the information out to you tomorrow, and hopefully we'll meet again. So has anyone got any further questions that they'd like to ask before we wrap up? Thank you so much, everyone, for taking part. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you're interested in taking your journey and practice further. And just drop me a line if you'd like any more information about resources that I've talked about this evening. Okay, but for now, everyone, blessings, sleep well, and I hope you have a lovely rest of your evening. Take care. Bye. Yes, piqued interest. I can feel that, Joe. Thanks. Oh, David. It's my pleasure. I'm really glad that you enjoyed it. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. Much appreciated. Take care. See you soon.